Our next biography is The Brave Cyclist, the true story of a Holocaust hero. And it's by Amelia Hoffman. It's illustrated by Chiara Fediel. Let's see. All right. Gino Bartali clutched the handlebars. Too short for Papa's bike, he shifted from side to side like a clumsy pinguino. His friends giggled, but Gino worried only about keeping his balance. Pedaling along the bank of the Arno River in Italy, he dreamed of cycling on a shiny bike of his own. Mama and Papa could hardly scrape together enough money to pay for food and clothes. When Gino turned 12, he spent his summer working to earn money for a bike. He could only find a boring job helping farmers shred dried palm leaves into strings for weaving baskets. When summer ended, with the extra few lira that his family chipped in, Gino had just enough money to buy a rusty old bike. Gino lives in Italy. Despite being small and sickly, Gino often led his friends on a steep, daring climb. The slope was called Macali, which means curses. Gino was amazed that he could easily outrace his friends to the top, even though they were bigger and stronger. From there, Gino could look down on the city of Florence with its cathedrals, palazzos, and the Grand Synagogue. Gino wanted to learn more about cycling. As a sixth grader, he took a part-time job at a bike shop. The shop owner, Oscar Casamonte, repaired racing bikes. He also competed in local races. Although Gino had a hard time concentrating on schoolwork, he listened attentively as Casamonte explained how to repair punctured tires, adjusted brakes, and fix broken frames. One day, Casamonte invited Gino to join him and his fellow racers on a ride. The cyclists pedaled through the Tuscan hills surrounding the village of Pont'Aima, where Gino lived. Some riders dropped out along the way, but Gino kept going. Casamonte was so impressed that he urged Gino's parents to let the boy compete in professional races. That's exciting. At first, Papa and Mama refused. They worried that the sport was too dangerous, and Gino had always been so frail and weak. But Gino kept pleading. Finally, on Gino's 17th birthday in July 1931, Papa gave in and granted his son the best birthday wish ever, permission to enter races and compete against other cyclists for awards. Gino's heart sped up. He had won Papa's trust. Now he must make himself into a winner. Each morning as the rooster crowed, Gino rose to perform 24 exercises. He trained to strengthen his muscles. He learned to slow down his breathing while riding long distances. Gino taught himself how to switch between sitting on the bike and standing on the pedals. He experimented with different diets to see which helped him the most. During one race, he gobbled up a dozen raw eggs, cracking their shells on his handlebars as he rode. Ew. By age 21, the frail boy had turned into a powerful racer. When Gino joined a racing team, he had to prove himself as a gregario. That's a rider who must do everything to help his team's leader win the race. Gino carried water bottles and changed tires on the road for the other cyclists. Soon he gained respect and became the captain of his own team. Gino participated in races across Italy. In 1936, he won his country's most prestigious competition, the Giro d'Italia, and earned enough money to buy a home for his parents. But Gino's wheels kept spinning for more. The most important event in the cycling world was the Tour de France. For many miles and many days, riders raced through France's most monstrous mountains. In 1938, Gino was ready for the challenge. Racing on rugged roads, Gino charged up jagged, grueling slopes in the Pyrenees mountain range. Pain penetrated his muscles, but he kept climbing until he reached the highest peak. But as Gino swooped downhill, he noticed some spectators had stepped into the road to cross to the other side. Gino was terrified he might hit them, so he clenched the brakes. He was thrown from his bike and flew in the air. Gino crashed to the ground, suffering scrapes, cuts, and bruises to his arms and legs. His bike ended up in a tangle, its front wheel crushed. As pain throbbed from his hips to his chest, Gino counted the seconds as he waited for a replacement for the damaged wheel. When his crew finally finished the work, he gathered his strength to get on the bike in spite of the pain. Gino pressed on but couldn't make up for lost time. The Belgian riders had passed him. He wouldn't win that stage of the race. But 15 days remained in the Tour. Gino was determined not to be defeated by the crash. Oh, perseverance. Gino fought to take the lead once again. His pulse pounded as he attacked the dirt and gravel course, storming up and down the high summits of the Alps, speeding toward victory. Declared king of the mountains, Gino got to wear the yellow jersey, an honor reserved for the winner of each daily stage. He kept the yellow jersey all the way to the finish line in Paris. As Gino rode into the stadium there, reporters and photographers crowded around him while thousands of spectators cheered him on. But Gino feared that the taste of victory would be bittersweet. There was trouble back in Italy. At that time, the Italian Prime Minister Benito Mussolini had declared himself Il Duce, meaning simply the leader. Anyone daring to disagree with him risked severe punishment. Mussolini decided who should compete in sporting competitions. Champions were expected to praise and thank him to show their loyalty. After winning the Tour de France, it was Gino's turn to speak to the crowds in Paris. Gino thanked his coach, saying, "During a moment when my legs started to become heavy or I felt that burning in my stomach, I heard your voice, and then soon enough, I felt myself comforted." Later, speaking over the radio, Gino thanked his fans and teammates but didn't mention Mussolini. Gino's speech angered the authorities back in Italy. The hero who had fought so hard to win the world's greatest bicycling competition would receive no grand reception when he returned to his country. That's cruddy. In July 1938, Mussolini published a hateful document declaring that Jewish citizens were enemies of the state. Jewish children were expelled from public schools and couldn't play in public parks. Their parents were often forced out of their jobs. Mussolini teamed with the German leader Adolf Hitler, who declared similar laws in Germany. Many Jewish people who were not born in Italy were dragged out of their homes and even arrested. Jewish people were forced to carry documents bearing their photographs, names, and signatures at all times. That way soldiers could identify them. As World War II raged into the autumn of 1943, Gino received a mysterious phone call. The call came from Gino's good friend Cardinal Elia dalla Costa, the Archbishop of the church in Florence. The Cardinal wanted to meet Gino in private. When Gino arrived at dalla Costa's office, the Cardinal closed the door behind them. Then in a hushed voice, he explained a secret plan. Dalla Costa wanted to save Jewish people in Italy by supplying them with false identification cards so they could escape to safety. Two skilled printers from the city of Assisi, Luigi and Trento Brizzi, had already agreed to secretly print the documents. They would use real photographs but change the addresses, places of birth, and signatures, giving each Jewish person a non-Jewish name and a new identity. The Cardinal wanted to know if Gino would help them. Gino was puzzled. The only jobs he'd ever had were those of farmhand, bike mechanic, and bike racer. How could he help? The Cardinal explained how Gino could use his bike for something even more daring than racing up and down the steepest mountains. Gino knew that helping Jewish people was a crime punishable by imprisonment or even death. Still, he agreed to be a secret courier for the Cardinal. Gino would risk his safety to help people he'd never met. Early one morning, Gino picked up documents from Dalla Costa's assistant in Florence. The papers included photos of Jewish people and their identification cards. After removing the seat and its post from the bike, Gino hid the documents inside the hollow bicycle frame. There he is. Then he sped off to deliver them to the printers in the town of Assisi. The trip of some 110 miles would not be an easy one. On the road, soldiers halted Gino at a checkpoint. His heart raced. Surely his bike would be searched. Gino feared what the men might do to him if they discovered his secret cargo. The soldiers recognized Gino as the beloved Italian champion cyclist. He used his fame to his advantage. Gino asked the soldiers not to touch his bike and made up an excuse. The distance between his seat, the handlebars, and the pedals had to be precise to avoid muscle strain, he explained. The soldiers believed him. Gino wiped the sweat off his forehead and continued his journey. When he arrived in Assisi, Gino delivered the documents from the Cardinal's assistant. In exchange, he picked up the forged identification cards that Luigi and Trento Brizzi had prepared. The new identification cards bore non-Jewish names. Gino hoped that the precious documents would save Jewish people. He hid them in his bike and hurried back to Florence. Along the way, Gino spotted an army patrol. He steered onto a side road and hid in the bushes. When daylight faded, he spotted glowing lights in the dark. Worried they could be headlights of military motorcycles, he rubbed mud all over his bike's frame. That way the chrome wouldn't shine in the light of an oncoming vehicle. For months, Gino encountered new obstacles with each mission. He rode with many questions on his mind. Could he convince the soldiers that his frequent trips were solely for training purposes? What if he couldn't get back in time to deliver the documents? What would happen to the people whose lives depended on him? The faces of innocent people in the photographs he smuggled reminded Gino that his mission was worthy of any sacrifice. He became more determined with each trip. Very brave. Uh-oh. Gino couldn't predict what would happen in his war-ridden country. Danger filled each day in Italy. Once, when Gino stopped for coffee, a burst of machine gun fire almost hit his bike. In 1944, Gino's worst fear came true. Il Duce's authorities discovered from letters from the church in Rome thanking Gino for his good work. The authorities didn't know what Gino had done, but they accused him of selling guns to groups fighting against Mussolini. Il Duce's men locked Gino in a dark cell. Sitting on a filthy floor, he heard the screams of prisoners being beaten. Gino was questioned for 3 days. He finally convinced the squad he hadn't delivered guns, but only helped to provide food for the poor. Freed from jail, but anxious and shaken, Gino worried that he would not be able to continue his important work. One day, he heard a shrieking blast. The Germans were blowing up most of the bridges around Florence. They wanted to slow down the British forces that were advancing toward the city in an effort to defeat Hitler and Mussolini. On August 11, 1944, the bells rang out over the Bargello, the People's Palace in Florence. As Jewish people crept out of their hiding places and joined crowds dancing in the streets, Gino heard the news. More than 4 years of war, terror, and hardship had come to an end. Gino had prayed that Mussolini and Hitler would be defeated. Now his prayers had been answered. After months of hiding, trembling, and concealing his secret, Gino joined the happy crowd. Italians were free in their dictator and safe from war. Soon, Gino shined up his bike. Though peace had finally returned, the effects of war remained. Women scurried around searching for scraps of food. Children played in the rubble of destroyed buildings. Gino was determined to lift the spirits of his fellow Italians. He began planning his next race. At 34, he was considered il vecchio, an old man in the sport of cycling. Many fans wondered if Gino could compete against much younger riders. But Gino trained with fierce determination, just as he had in his youth. In 1948, caked in mud and soaked by rain, he won the Tour de France for the second time. People of all races and religions celebrated. Neither poverty nor hardship could weaken their spirits. The frail, sickly boy who once struggled to ride his papa's bike had restored Italians' faith in freedom and justice. And this is a real picture of Gino Bartali. What an awesome book. He was a hero. Holy shamoly. I hope you guys liked that. See you soon.